Hi boys and girls, today we're going to hear the word legend again. Remember that in ancient times, people told legends to explain things around them. Explain is a verb that means to tell why something happens. Chapter 10, the title is The Ancient Legend. Jack opened his eyes. He was wearing his own clothes and his sneakers. The cloth sack had turned back into his backpack. "Welcome home, Master Librarian," said Morgan. She stood in the treehouse smiling at them. "Hi," said Annie. "We brought you the ancient legend," said Jack. "Wonderful," said Morgan. Jack reached into his pack. He took out the china book. Then he pulled out the bamboo book. He handed them to Morgan. "What's the legend about?" said Annie. "It's called The Silk Weaver and the Cowherd," said Morgan. "It's a very famous Chinese tale." So let me stop here for a second. We know that Morgan sent the kids to find a specific legend. We know that they met the cowherd and the silk weaver, but they didn't seem important characters at the time. Now I see they did have a purpose. The author introduced them at the beginning so that she could connect the legend to the trip that Jack and Annie took. "Guess what, Morgan?" said Annie. "We actually met them. We helped them get together." "Oh, did you?" said Morgan. "Yes," said Jack. "The silk weaver's ball of silk saved us." "What does the legend say about them?" asked Annie. "It says that long ago they were heavenly beings who lived in the sky," said Morgan. "When they came to earth, they fell in love. That's when we met them," said Annie. "Yes, I imagine so," said Morgan. "The book you brought back tells about their happiness on earth, but I'm afraid a later legend tells us that when they returned to the sky, the king and queen of the skies separated them by a heavenly river called the Milky Way." "Oh, no," said Annie. "They get back together once a year," said Morgan. "On that night, birds make a bridge over the sky, in the sky, over the Milky Way." Jack and Annie gazed up at the bright summer sky. "Go home now," said Morgan. "Come back 2 weeks from today, when you're going to find a book in the country of Ireland over 1,000 years ago." "That sounds like fun," said Annie. Morgan frowned. "I'm afraid it was a very dangerous time," she said, "for Viking raiders often attacked the seacoasts." "Vikings?" said Jack. "He had enough danger to last a long time." "Don't worry about it now," said Morgan. "Just go home and rest." Jack nodded. "I'll try," he said, pulling on his backpack. "Bye," said Annie. "See you in 2 weeks." "Thank you for your help," said Morgan. "Any time," said Annie. They headed down the rope ladder. From the ground, they waved to Morgan. Then they started for home. As they got to the edge of the woods, Annie stopped. "Listen to the crickets," she said. Jack listened. The cricket chirps sounded louder than usual. "Their ancestors lived in a time of the Dragon King," said Annie. "Oh, brother," said Jack. "Right now, the grown-ups are telling the little crickets a legend," said Annie. "Yeah, sure," said Jack. "A legend passed down from their ancestors," said Annie. Jack smiled. He didn't want to admit it, but the cricket noise did sound like a storytelling. He could almost hear them saying, "Dragon King, Dragon King, Dragon King." "Jack! Annie!" came a voice. It was their mother calling them. The spell was broken. The cricket stories were just plain old cricket sounds again. "Coming!" Jack shouted. Jack and Annie ran down their street and across their yard. "Did you have a good time in China?" their mom asked. "It was pretty scary," said Annie. "We got lost in a tomb," said Jack, "but we were saved by an ancient book." Their mom smiled and shook her head. "My books are wonderful, aren't they?" she said. "Yep," said Jack and Annie as they followed her inside. So as you reread today, I want you to think about how the author used the cricket to make a good ending for this story. Okay, I'm also going to share some of the facts that are found right at the end of the story after page 68. So it says, "More facts for you and Jack." Number 1, Chinese writing has over 50,000 characters. According to the legend, the first characters were devised from the tracks of birds and animals, so made from bird and animal tracks. 2, in 221 BC, China was divided into many kingdoms. Under the leadership of the first emperor, Shang Hang Dai, who called himself the Dragon King, China became a united country. Afraid that Chinese scholars were a threat to his power, he ordered all their books burned. So that was true. 3, silk thread comes from the cocoon of the silkworm, which feeds on mulberry leaves. The art of making silk was kept a secret because the Chinese once depended on silk for a foreign trade. So they didn't want to share it with anyone else so that they could keep trading it. Number 4, the first emperor built the Great Wall to protect his empire from northern invaders. According to Chinese legend, the wall is a dragon that has turned into stone. Number 5, since the 1970s, archaeologists have been investigating the Dragon King's tomb and have unearthed over 50,000 artifacts, which means they brought them up to be able to look at. Number 6, the Chinese legend of the silk weaver and the cowherd is connected to the stars Vega and Altair. The two were married on Earth, but when they returned to heaven, they were so happy that they refused to work. The king and queen of heaven grew angry and separated them by the Milky Way. But once a year they are together. On the 7th day of the 7th moon, magpies make a bridge between them. So just some fun facts. Day of the Dragon King.